Hello, welcome to my channel. I'm Ann, the prophetess divine. Thank you for tuning in. As you can tell by the title of this video, we are going to be talking about the effects of sexual trauma in one's life. Now, this is part one, so be sure to subscribe and stay tuned because we're also going to get more into it with part two. Okay, so this is just part one to kind of get us started. Now, let me just say the reason why I'm doing this is because one, I hope that by telling my story that it will also spark someone else to be inspired to begin to start their healing journey, because sometimes we don't realize that it is the things that we have pulled the rug over coming from childhood that is causing destruction and disruption in our adulthood, in our adult relationships, in our adult lives. And so I'm hoping that my story will inspire someone else to also heal. And also I'm hoping that by telling my story that others can also get an understanding of how I got to where I am today. So that's why I'm telling my story, okay? So, you know what? Let's just get right into it. Let me start off by saying that my mother was raped and abused by her own father at the age of 9 years old, okay? And he abused her for many years after that. Now, I can say that because it's really not a secret right now at this point. You know, she's written a book about it as well. And this is where she came from. This is where she started from. So you can imagine, I am a child of someone who went through such a serious trauma. She was only 9 years old, and it was our own dad, you know? And so you can imagine what I've went through as a child and the dynamic of the mother-daughter relationship. But I can say this, that we've come a long way now, and we are in a much better place in this day and age, okay? So, with that being said, what happened to her inadvertently and unintentionally affected me. And so much so that I was exposed to and became accustomed to sexual energy by the age of 2 years old. So much so that by the time I was 7, I didn't even realize that I was being molested for 2 years by a 12-year-old. Yeah. She was 12 and I was 7. And the way that she kind of coaxed me into it was that she made it seem like we were in a relationship. And see, I had already been exposed to sexual energy. So it wasn't something that I wasn't already kind of used to. So for me, it didn't seem abnormal. I was only 7, so how would I even, have this understanding at 7 years old about being in a, relationship? And she made it seem like we were like boyfriend, girlfriend type of relationship, okay? And this went on for 2 years. And our parents didn't even realize what was really going on because they thought it was just some cute little relationship, like, oh, it's big sister, little sister, they're so adorable, they are so cute and stuff like that. They thought it was this big sister, little sister relationship. Now, let me just say, that lets you know right off the top that all offenders aren't males. We have some female offenders out here, y'all. So be careful, first of all. Okay? So I was exposed to sexual energy way too early. Already off the top, okay? So fast forward 15. I'm 15, okay? Now, mind you, even though I had already been exposed to, sexual energy and so forth, I had still managed to keep and hold on to my virginity. So I was still a virgin. Okay. So one day I went to the mall. I was about 15 years old. And I was in the arcade and I saw this really nice looking guy in the arcade, really light brown eyes, attractive, athletically built and stuff. So I was attracted, and I was young, and we started exchanging eye contact. He came over, talked to me, we had a conversation, he gave me his number. I went on about my day. So we started talking. I called him. We was talking on and off for a while, about a good 2 weeks. Okay. And one day he asked me to come to his house. Now, mind you, I was 15. My mother had kind of told me, look, you can't have a boyfriend yet. You're not ready for a boyfriend. And I didn't have one, but I was still just kind of like exploring the boy-girl connection. Okay. And I knew, first of all, I didn't know when I met him that he was 18. I thought he was around my age. But he told me after talking that he was 18. And at that point, I was thinking, oh, snap, I done caught me an 18-year-old, done caught me a grown man. This is what I'm thinking in my head, like, oh, because I'm 15 and I'm thinking, oh, Lord, I done caught me somebody 18. I'm thinking I done did something, right? So when he invited me to his house, I was like, okay, he said he just wants me to come over, watch a movie. Okay, that's fine. I can do that. So went to his house, and we were talking, watching the movies, and he was asking me a lot of questions. Now, at 15, you're not thinking, especially if you haven't been told about how to handle those type of relationships and what men will do and say and so forth. And I didn't really realize at the time that when I look back on it, I realized that he was scheming, but I didn't really see it as he was asking me all these types of questions and like prying. So finally he got to like a sexual type of question. And I was like, I don't know what you're talking about, because I don't do those type of things. And then he was like, what you mean you don't do those type of things? And I was like, I'm a whole virgin, and I'm keeping that for my, for my special one, da da da. So at the time, I didn't realize that, like, when I said that, it really ticked off something in his mind. Like a normal person would hear something like that and be like, okay, one or two things. They'll be like, oh, I don't even want to mess with her because, she a whole virgin. She don't know what she's doing, da da da. Or either the other side of that is, which was the side, or either you decide you don't want to deal with that, or you decide that, you want to make it special for that person, right? You want to make that first time special. No, that's not what was going on in his mind. That's not what he was thinking at all. Okay. His mind went straight to, oh, I'm going to take this, like, wow. Okay. And the only reason why I can kind of smile about it now, laugh about it now like that, is because you guys have no idea the one day, and I'll talk about that in part 2 about what I had to go through to heal this situation. There was a point in time where I couldn't even talk about this without crying like big tears. And sometimes I couldn't even get the story out. And that's why no one even knew that this happened to me until I became an adult. I told no one until I became an adult. So let me just finish the story. So I started to feel uncomfortable. Maybe it was God then trying to tell me, okay, you should probably excuse yourself at this point. But I tried that. I got up. I started to feel uncomfortable. So I said I wanted to go home. So I got up and I walked to the door, and he jumped up off the couch and ran to the door and locked it. And I was like, what are you doing? Okay. And he was all like, don't leave. Da, 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 da. So we were kind of pushing each other because I was trying to get out the door. For some reason, I just really wanted to leave, and he started coaxing me to stay. And he made up some story about, because he had already knew from us talking that I love to like play video games and watch people play video games and stuff. So he made up this whole story that he had this new game in his room and he really wanted to show me, just play with me for 5 minutes. He said he wanted me to play the video game with him for like 5 minutes or something. I'm 15. So I'm thinking, oh, he's trying to be sweet, you know. So, okay, that's all he wants to do. Da, da, da. So we go to the room, you know, and we sit down and he pulls out the controller. And I'm thinking, where's the other controller at? This ain't but one controller, you know. So he's all like, oh, just watch me play for a minute. And he saw that I was starting to get a little uncomfortable because I started feeling some type of way because I felt like he had lied. So he got up, he put the controller down out of nowhere, got up and locked his door. And I was like, why are you locking your door? I said, I'm fixing to go. So I got up to leave, and that's when it happened. It was brutal, very brutal. And I screamed at the top of my lungs while it was happening, to the point where he covered my mouth and my nose. I couldn't even breathe. He just was pressing down on my nose and my mouth, and he was like, stop screaming, you know, and I couldn't breathe. So I stopped screaming at that point. And when it was over, I was in shock. I was in shock because when I looked down, all I saw was blood just everywhere. Like, it was brutal the way that he did it. It was so brutal. It was violent. Okay. And I just remember being so stunned. I remember being so shocked. I didn't even realize really what had happened to me in a way. And all he said to me was, oh, you was a virgin. Those were the last things he said to me before he escorted me out the door. And I remember walking home in pain. Every step was like pain shooting through me. And I don't even know how I got home, because I felt like I was in some sort of a trance. Okay. And by the way, I talk about that also in my book here, Memories of a Girl Once Was. So y'all be sure to check that out. I'll put some links down below, because I talk more about that, what happened in this book. And I also talk about the other traumas that I experienced in my childhood in this book. So y'all, I didn't just experience sexual trauma. I also experienced other types of traumas. But I want y'all to check this book out so you can get into it. And like I said, by the time I got home, I didn't even really realize what had happened to me. And I remember I called up one of my cousins. I don't even know if she still remembers this, but I called her up. And I asked her about how her first time was, what was her experience like. And I remember hearing about other girls, you know, first time and their experiences. And I don't remember it ever sounding like what I went through. So, you know, when I told my cousin, she said, and she was like, why are you asking this stuff? And I told her what had happened to me. And she said, girl, you was raped. You was raped. You just got raped. You should tell somebody. And I just started crying. And for some reason, I just couldn't bring myself to tell a grown-up. Like, I couldn't bring myself to do anything. And for days, I just stayed at home until one day he called. And when he called, I was so upset. I was like, why are you calling my house? You raped me. And that was the first thing I said to him. I was like, you raped me. And then he said, you know, whose story are they going to believe? He was like, you better not tell anyone, because he was like, you better not go to the police. You better not tell anyone, because they're not going to believe you. Because who are they going to believe, you or me? Because I'm going to tell them you was a neighborhood whore. I mean, these were the things he was saying to me. I'm going to tell them you gave it up. Now I'm 15. So, of course, if I was an adult, that probably wouldn't have flew. But I was only 15. And so I was believing the things that he was saying. He was all like, nobody's going to believe your story. You a liar. I'm going to tell everybody you a liar. I'm going to tell them you gave it up. You a neighborhood whore. Who they going to believe? And he was telling me about how he had a basketball scholarship and I wasn't going to ruin that for him. Like, it sounded like a movie. This actually happened. This is where they get these movies from. This actually happened to me. And he actually said that I was going to ruin his basketball scholarship, whatever the case may be. So that moment changed my life. That moment changed my life, because it was in that moment I had a choice at 15, and that was to tell someone what happened to me or believe what he said. And I didn't realize that those were the choices that I had at that time. I didn't realize that that was the choice I was making when I put that phone down and I decided to believe him. Now I'm nothing. Now I'm tainted. The one thing that I had, the one thing I had left, the one sacred thing I had left, gone. And I turned to alcohol. I started to become dependent on alcohol, on drugs. I let men use me. I was torn. I was really messed up from that, and no one knew. I told no one. The only one who really knew was kind of my cousin. Kind of knew, but she never really brought it up again. But that is what happened to me. So I experienced a lot of sexual trauma early on, and that particular thing right there triggered everything that I had been going through, including everything that I was going through at home and everything that I had went through at school. All of it just suddenly came to that, boiling point. And that's when the string of bad decisions and bad choices really began for me in my life. So that's part one, you guys. When I get it, I'm going to talk to you guys about part two. And in part two, I am going to talk about how what happened to me led me into bad relationships and choosing partners that aren't right for me, because I was still not healed. And I'm going to talk about in part two, or either part three, one of them, if we get to it, how I began to really heal the sexual trauma within myself. Okay, so thank you guys for tuning in. Thank you guys for watching, and make sure you subscribe.